Good morning. Today is Wednesday, the 6th day of Kislev. And we continue in the essay 4, the long essay of Kuntres Acharon, the last part of the Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe is discussing about the mitzvahs, doing the actual mitzvahs versus prayer versus Torah study. There's the pros and the cons. There's an interesting thing what the Alter Rebbe is discussing today is about studying the mystical part of the Torah in and of itself, meaning, I guess we can call the pro and cons of studying the Kabbalah. But not just the Kabbalah itself. We mentioned yesterday that there is the difference between the studying of the Kabbalah and the way the studying of the Hasidus. In fact, the Baal Shem Tov himself was opposed to people study the Kabbalah. That maybe sounds surprising. But as it was put by some of the scholars, some of the Hasidic scholars, they say that the Kabbalah humanizes God, where Hasidus brings out the godliness of the human, of the person, makes a person more godly. What it means is when you study the Kabbalah without the proper context, without a proper understanding, it is it's mapping the whole system of the godly descent, the chain-like descent, into talking about the names and the maps and what comes first, what comes second, and all of these things, it becomes very, very humanized. You're thinking on these godly revelations in human terms, whereas when you study the Hasidus, it brings out the godliness of the person, explains how we are connecting to God through everything. And yes, it is important to study those things, and we'll explain why. It seems like a contradiction, but we'll explain everything. So basically, Alter Rebbe started with saying that there is something special about the prayer, and that is a prayer can actually change things in this physical world. If a person, God forbid, is not well, prayer can actually make him well. And you see the change in this world. And on the other hand, Alter Rebbe went on to explain that there is an advantage in the mitzvah, the actual fulfilling of the mitzvah. Fulfilling of the mitzvah, he says there are two things about it, two advantages. One is that when you do the mitzvah, you refine the sparks. And we explained what that means. There's godly sparks all over the world that needs to be refined, needs to be elevated, and that is done through the mitzvah, fulfilling God's commandments. Another thing he said about the mitzvah, comparing doing the actual mitzvah to the emotional connection to God or the intellectual connection to God, which one is a stronger connection? So that we explained yesterday. And we said that when you have an intellectual and emotional connection, love and fear of Hashem, all you accomplish is an external connection. When you do a mitzvah, you are connecting to the very essence of Hashem, because Hashem vested his essence in the creation of this physical being, which with you do the mitzvah. And he brought the example of picking an esrog and sukkos. You hold the esrog and you do the way Hashem wants you to do. You're actually holding and connecting to the very essence of Hashem, which is invested in this physical mitzvah. But when you're doing when you have the love and the fear of Hashem, it's all the way you imagine, the way as much as you can understand, as much as you can reach. And so, and the level that you can reach is something that is very, very limited, being that you're a human and you cannot reach very high. You need Hashem to come down and give you the connection. And that is done through the mitzvah. At the same time, the Alter Rebbe says, not only doing the mitzvah, but also studying the halacha, studying the law of the mitzvah is also something that you connect to the very essence of Hashem, because that's studying the will of Hashem of the mitzvah itself. But when you compare this to studying, well, before we say this is another thing, it says also, when you study the mystical part of the mitzvah, understanding the mystics of the mitzvah, and that is, you learn from Chassidus, that gives you yet another deeper aspect of the connection with the mitzvah, which means connecting to Hashem himself. That is why the Torah says, when certain mitzvahs we cannot do today physically, when we study the Torah that talks about those mitzvahs, when we study the laws of those mitzvahs, it is considered like we do it ourselves. When you study the laws of the Olah sacrifice, today we cannot bring a sacrifice. So it's considered, when you study the laws of this, considered like you are bringing an offering to Hashem. And that's why in the morning before davening, we study those laws. We say in the Mishnah about the laws of the korbanot. We say the korbanot before the prayer. And so this is about learning about the laws of the mitzvahs. And when you learn about the mystics of the mitzvahs, it gets you even to a deeper level of connection. However, when you compare this learning of the laws of the mitzvahs to learning just about the hishtalshelos, the mystical system, Kabbalistic things, that connects you only to the very external part. It doesn't connect you to the very essence of God, of the godliness. It's all connects you. You all knowing the map. It's knowing, and I gave the example yesterday. Sometimes you want to see your grandchildren that are in a far place. You want to connect them. You can do it through the Zoom, through the video chatting, and you see everything, but you don't have the essence. You come and you feel, you connect. I mean, so connecting to Hashem himself is through the mitzvah, through studying the laws of the mitzvah, in cases when you cannot do the mitzvah, because here the studying the laws again is studying the will of Hashem that is invested in this mitzvah, and understanding the depth of the mitzvah, and thereby really getting a deeper connection. But when you study just the Kabbalah itself, just a mystical system, it's only connecting to the externality of this, of the whole system. Well, the question is, so that means, should we study those ishtalshelus, the chain-like descent of the whole system of godliness in this world, or maybe should we not study it? So here the Alter Rebbe explains, yes, it is important to study it, and is going to explain us why it is important, even though it's not like studying the Kabbalah, like studying the halacha or the secret of the mitzvah itself. So let's look inside. Says the Alter Rebbe, she'ein kein beseder ha'ishtalshelus. It does not apply to the study of the order of hishtalshelus. What does not apply? What we just said, the connecting to the very essence of Hashem, to the very essence of the godliness that comes, as he said, from the external part of the spheres of Atzilus, and I'm talking over here Kabbalistic words, but we explained it in the previous lesson. It says that this does not apply to the study of the order of Ishtalshelus, the chain-like stage of progressive self-screening, whereby the divine light descends from level to level until ultimately this corporal world is created. This is the Ishtalshelus, the chain-like descent of the godly revelation to create this world. So when you study these things, even if one does comprehend the external aspect of the existence of the spheres and spiritual level involved, even if a person does understand, a very big Kabbalist who understands the depth of it, nevertheless, it's not like learning the mitzvahs. Loi adif mitzad atzmai kelimida mitzvahs shemasig v'toifes amehus. This is not intrinsically as worthy as the study of the laws of the mitzvahs, where one comprehends and grasps their essence. When you study the laws of the mitzvahs, which is the will of Hashem, you actually connect to the very essence. Moreover, this study is considered, in certain cases, the equivalent of actual performance. As we said before, as it is written, this is the law of the burnt offering and the meal offering. And as our sages say, when you study Zois this is the Torah. When you study the Torah, the teaching, the laws of the offerings, it is considered as if you actually bring up an offering. So the question then, as we asked before, so what does it mean? Does it mean that do we have the mitzvah to learn those mystical parts, or maybe that's not important since we cannot connect to the essence by learning the mystical chain-like descent of godly creation of this world? So why do we need it or do we not? And the answer is yes, we do need it. And in a way, it is important even more than other things. And he'll explain why. So the Alter Rebbe says, "Elo sheyedias hametzias ma'ishtalshelus hi gam kein mitzvah rama v'nisoa ve'adraba oila al kolana." However, the knowledge of the existence of the ishtalshelus, the chain-like descent of godliness, is also a lofty and exalted mitzvah. Indeed, it outweighs them all. All of the mitzvahs and the study of the laws in the Torah. Why? Why is it so important to learn about the Ishtalshelus? It says, "K'meishekasu v'yadato hayom chulu." As it is written, know this today, that the Lord is God. Then there's another verse that says, "Da et Elokei avicha." It says, know the God of your father. Meaning there is an obligation to attain a knowledge or apprehension of divinity. And why? Because umaviyah lelev shalim. Moreover, this leads to the whole heart. Let's say there was once in the time when the Chassidus started developing, people learning the teachings of the study of Chassidus. So there was a scholar that went from a non-Chassidic place and he went to learn Chassidus. And he spent time and learned a lot of Chassidus, and he came back and his Rebbe, his Rosh Yeshiva, told him, what are you doing? Why are you going there? What don't you have here? Learn Torah, we'll learn everything. So he answered and he said to him, we have a Shulchan Aruch. What is a Shulchan Aruch? It is the code of Jewish law. When you need to know what to do, what do? You want to know the laws of Shabbos, you look in the Shulchan Aruch. You know how to keep Shabbos. You want to know the laws of Kashrus, you look in the Shulchan Aruch. You know how to keep the kosher. Everything is in Shulchan Aruch. That's the way a Jew lives. A Jew lives by the Shulchan Aruch. Basically, with every mitzvah that is applicable today, you read it, you see it in the Shulchan Aruch. So, what are the certain mitzvahs are not in the Shulchan Aruch? Like mitzvahs about the temple. And the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, is written for the mitzvahs that are applicable today. The question he asked him, one of the mitzvahs in the Torah is that know God. One of the mitzvahs in the Torah is ve'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem. There's another mitzvah, et Hashem Elokecha tira, you should fear God. Those are part of the mitzvahs that are important today, to know today. Where is the Shulchan Aruch for these mitzvahs? Where can we find the Code of Jewish Law of telling us and explaining to us how we are supposed to love Hashem and to fear Hashem? It doesn't say in Shulchan Aruch. You know where the Shulchan Aruch is? In the Chassidus. When you study the Chassidus and you study the greatness of Hashem, da et Elokei avicha, you study the greatness of Hashem, knowing the greatness of Hashem, this brings Avdeyu B'Leiv of Shalom, that you serve Him with a full heart. And this is why I go to the Chassidus, to learn that those mitzvahs that are not taught in your yeshiva. Continues the Alter Rebbe. So this is why even those parts that they're not directly explaining the mitzvah itself, they're not direct, they're only talking about the ishtalshus and generally talking about the grasping, understanding the system, the godly system. It is important to study it because that brings us to serve Hashem, to know Hashem, to serve Him with a good heart. Shehu ha'ikar. And this is the essential thing. The wholehearted awe of God is the ultimate purpose of all commandments. Another thing it says, the comprehension of the existence entails divesting this subject of any physicality. So, meaning, you understand the Metzius, the existence of Hashem. It makes you, first of all, to understand it properly is to separate this from the physicality, from understanding it in a very materialistic terms, but also the person himself becomes more refined and it becomes connecting to more the spiritual part of the person rather than the physical part. However, this mitzvah of studying the greatness of Hashem is only one individual mitzvah of the 630 mitzvahs. It says, Rak shezui mitzvah achas mitaryag. However, this mitzvah of knowing God and apprehending divinity is but one mitzvah of the 613. Ve'adam tzarich lekayem kol taryag. And a man must fulfill all 613 mitzvahs. Lefi shehein ishtalshelus amehus dechitzoni is the kelim the atzilus. For they descend from the essence of the external aspect of the vessels of Atzilus. The source whose standing was explained above, that it comes from the external part of the Atzilus. We're not going to go into it. You can go back to yesterday's class to understand this. Lachein, it says, therefore, tzarich leharbez belimud kol atayag v'kiyumim b'poel mamash. It says there, hence one must extensively study all 613 mitzvahs and hence fulfill them in actual practice and thought, speech, and deed. Shem Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, which parallel to the world of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, respectively. Levarer Berurim Hashasham, in order to purify whatever needs purification. There. So, what it means, you have to study all the 630 mitzvahs. Some mitzvahs you can fulfill in actuality, and other mitzvahs you can fulfill in the studying it, and it's considered as if it is fulfilled. And this is why also another good point of the Rebbe, introducing the teaching, the learning, the studying of the Rambam, the Maimonides, which unlike the Shulchan Aruch, that covers only mitzvahs that are applicable today, the Rambam Maimonides in the Mishnah Torah covers all 630 mitzvahs. And when we study the Rambam, as the Rebbe instituted, we finish every single year. If you study 3 chapters a day, you study the entire Torah with all 613 commandments. And if you study it in the 1 chapter a day, you finish it in 3 years. So this is, to summarize what he gives us in today's shir, is on the one hand the studying of the Kabbalah, which is through the Chassidus, of course. It is not connecting to the essence on the one hand, like studying the actual mitzvahs and the halachas. But yet, on the other hand, it is also one mitzvah, considered a mitzvah, an important mitzvah to study it, because this leads to a person to fear and love Hashem and serve Hashem with a full heart. So this is the end of today's shir. Thank you all for joining. Hashem will continue tomorrow morning. Any questions we can discuss today now?